But now, what we have a panel. We have a panel discussion going to be moderated by Robert Scoble. And it has Sean Varah on it, Eric Cheng from DJI, Nick Pilkington from DroneDeploy. This is kind of going to be a free-form discussion. We're going to talk about consumer to prosumer with drones, and it'll be kind of a free-form discussion. All right, and let's see what happens.
So I'm Robert Scoble. Everybody awake? Rackspace pays me to go around the world and talk to innovators and and interview people on a video, and I put that up on YouTube or Periscope or something. I have a new 360-degree camera. Could you guys each introduce yourselves real briefly so people have a context of who you are and what you do? Start with you.
Hi, I'm Sean Varah, CEO, founder.
Hey, check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
And I'll get up. Let me sync this one. I'll be right back. And this microphone works too. I'm Sean Varah, CEO and founder of Motion DSP. We're a software company. We process data from drones. We've been in business 10 years, profitable for 4, and we've worked with the military for probably about 8 years, and are now transitioning to the commercial space.
Hey guys, my name is Nick Pilkington. I'm the CTO of DroneDeploy. We're a small company based in Soma. There are about 10 of us. And effectively, we're writing software to make it really, really easy for anyone to operate a drone and get something done.
I'm Eric Cheng. I'm Director of Aerial Imaging and the General Manager of the San Francisco office for DJI. We make the Phantom and the Inspire 1 and the most popular quadcopters in the world.
Very cool. Most of the audience, who is doing stuff like wedding photography or stuff that requires only a $1,300 drone? Anybody in there? Most of you are in the big boy range. Then you're flying or drones for farming or for movie industry or something more commercial is what I'm guessing, right? Military stuff like that, right?
Oil and gas, mining.
Yeah.
Inspection. Yep.
Yeah, because usually I'm talking to audiences who are more interested in the consumer drones, which is what I usually am flying. I'm not flying the big boy drones that carry a red camera or LiDAR around, that kind of thing.
Well, I think what's so interesting about DJI though is they've cracked it open. I think they came up with the first really practical and high quality drone that was affordable, and it's amazing to us to see how many people are in industry who are prototyping all of their applications using Phantoms. So I mean, it's really thanks to DJI, really, I think you've really cracked open the possibilities by providing a platform that finally worked, in a way that people could do real things with it. So, kudos to you.
So, I walked the show floor, and I've been keeping up to date on what people are doing. What's on the higher end, above $10,000? What are people doing with drones, and why is there a market for these folks in the room?
Well, I'll answer from our side. Yeah. So, I mean, right now, the current biggest customer is really the military still. I mean, they have all the platforms. They have, the Army alone has 8,000 drones, for example, and every day the Air Force flies, something on the order of 65 combat air patrols, of Predator or Reaper. So by far they're the biggest spender still, and after the United States, it's really our international coalition partners who are spending the most, and commercials, a small component from there. So in terms of our business, really, the majority of our money is still on the military side, but we're seeing a lot from oil and gas, which have extremely expensive problems that they need to solve that drones are very useful for. So, is that iceberg going to hit my drilling platform, for example?
Let's talk about police departments. A lot of police departments have a helicopter to watch traffic, or in this instance, riots in Baltimore. Do you see that police departments are going to get into drones and using that? I know at DJI's announcement, there was a fire department that used drones to put a situational awareness platform up so that they could watch what's going on the ground and deal with the chaos of an emergency situation a lot better.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like the military use case where you need to have eyes on as quickly as possible. And certainly, again, there are many companies here who are experienced in this area, and perhaps more so than we are. But certainly it's about $5,000 an hour or more to fly a helicopter, for example. You know, a helicopter, if you have something like that riot, you've got to get that helicopter, you know, someone's got to drive to the airport, you know, ready the helicopter, put it in the air, fly to location, and then you start getting eyes on. You know, a drone is something that can be carried by local law enforcement, put in the air in a matter of minutes, and you can get eyes on right away. And the sooner the better. I mean, those are critical situations where understanding what is happening right now and where it is happening is extremely critical. So I think, yeah, drones have can add incredible value and really literally save lives by being able to get into the air and provide data faster.
Eric, I know you had video and you had a fire department at your press announcement a couple weeks ago. Are you seeing that kind of activity? Well, tell me what you're seeing happen with the $1,300 drones and you also have a drone that's a little bit higher expense. A big boy lifter.
Right. We have drones up to octocopters that carry gimbal stabilized 5Ds, for example. But of course, we're finding most of the momentum in drones this size, kind of the sub 2 kilogram. This is 3.3 pounds. And we noticed a lot of momentum in live broadcasting. Some of it we sort of instigated, but live broadcasting from drones. And so this subject is of particular interest because I think there will be regulations if they allow, but there will be a lot of citizen journalism through live broadcasts from drones. And one of the things that we did in the Phantom 3 announcement was that we announced integration with YouTube Live. So now that our radio is cabled to a smart device, so we're talking over USB to Android and iOS, LTE and Wi-Fi are suddenly available at all times while you're talking to the drone and streaming down in HD. So we will literally have 2-tap stream to YouTube Live. So in situations like what we're talking about now, it's much more likely that a civilian in the area will put something up broadcasting to YouTube before any law enforcement is involved.
Yeah. Do you think law enforcement, once they figure out the capabilities of this and how to fly it, and we were talking backstage with you about how hard it is still for normal people to pick up a drone, learn to fly it, learn to control the camera, learn to land it, and learn all about the GPS and the compass lock. Eric gave me a little class on mine, so I had a head start, but it's still a pretty hard piece of kit to operate for most people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general that's one of the biggest barriers to mainstream adoption is still there's this high operational complexity with drones. And like you said, that's something that DJI seem to have cracked. They've given us a package which has got a camera, it's got a drone, it's reliable, it's repeatable, and we trust it. And what's most exciting about that, especially for us, is we can use that as a platform. We can take those hardware capabilities and we can now start building on top of that. And I think that's the sort of change that we want to see happening. We want to see more and more of the hardware reach that point where you trust it. It's going to work. It's going to do what you think it's going to do. And then we can really dig deep on the exciting use cases like law enforcement and all the things that we really want to get done. Because like flight in and of itself is fun and it's exciting, it's amazing, but it's not really useful when it comes to commercial applications. You've got to do something else in addition to that.
Yeah. After the novelty wears off of flying it up and down, your street and figuring out how to fly it, the commercial aspects, I assume, are more programmatic. If I owned a huge farm and I wanted to see crop damage after a windstorm or something like that, I'd want to fly in a prearranged pattern, grab images, and then process those images. Is that what you guys are doing? And is that where the commercial starts kicking in and the consumer sort of ends?
Yeah, I think our feeling is that the only difference between commercial drones and consumer drones is software. The hardware is good enough. You can use the same piece of hardware as a consumer. You can also add some software to it and use it in a commercial use case. And the drones themselves are only going to get better. They're going to get cheaper. The capabilities are going to increase. The only thing that really separates it from solving a commercial problem is software.
Well, there's a little bit of a sensor difference as well. I mean, out here in the hall is LiDAR. That's not available yet on my DJI drone, right? So I
hope that's coming.
Yeah. LiDAR is an array of lasers that grab a point cloud of what they're looking at, right?
Yeah, I think there's also a lot in the telemetry too. I mean, I think we'll certainly see it come to the consumer drones, but knowing exactly where the camera is pointing and exactly, I want to know the GPS location of that pixel. I think that's something that in the higher end platforms you get. Certainly that is extremely important to the military, for example. But even they have difficulty with accurate geospatial metadata. But I think that's something that separates, there is a big difference between a consumer drone and a professional drone for something like that. And that's very important when you're measuring things. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you put the drone in the air for a reason. You're not there to play with it. You're there to get an answer. Like crop damage is, what is the area of acreage that has been damaged? You need to measure that as quickly as possible. You're going to submit your claim. The insurance company's going to come out and validate that. And that's real money. That's a tens of $1,000s insurance claim, one way or the other. So that's a critical question to answer.
I'm wondering if this conference is going to split up into separate conferences next year. How many people are using drones to do videography or photography? Wedding photography, movies, stuff like that. How many people are using it for agriculture in some way? How many people are using it in the oil and gas industry? And what the hell are the rest of you doing with drones? Anybody yell out an answer what you're doing with drones that don't fit in those three buckets? Surveying?
Yeah.
Inspections of what? Houses? Of
infrastructure, bridges.
Bridge and infrastructure, power lines, anything like that? Roofs? Law enforcement?
I think that's what's most exciting about this is this huge long tail of applications. Like you can think of the earliest markets, agriculture, construction, mining, surveying, but there's this huge number of applications of new things that people can do now that we have drones, rather than replacing the things they already do with drones because they're more efficient. Like we get people calling into us asking if they can use drones for vegetation encroachment, obviously conservation, wildlife are big applications. Guys wanting to just chase away birds on their farm, as simple as that. If they can have an automated solution to that, it's useful for him. I think that's what's exciting too.
I mean, a lot of it's just getting a camera or a sensor in a place where you need it. And, I think it was an EasyJet that's going to use a drone to do airplane inspection. Now, you can do that inspection perfectly well with a human on a ladder. It's just going to take a lot more time. So it's really about... And
if you get a ladder near a plane, you have a chance of breaking something. One of my friends has a jet, and he has little antennas on the wing. You get a ladder, and you have the ladder fall onto one of those. It's $1,000 and a delay, right?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely.
Where do we go with this? I mean, it's crazy how many different applications there are for drones already. There's been previous sessions that have covered the law and what the changes of the law is. Obviously, law is probably a retardant on this industry. Am I saying that right? Or is it something that's freeing the industry and people to use drones now because there's finally some law that we understand what it is?
I don't know people's opinion. I don't know if that question's already been discussed and covered this afternoon. And we don't make drones, so I can't speak to that specifically. But in terms of our business, in terms of doing image processing from cameras that fly in the air, I don't think regulation has stopped our business because people can do a lot of these same use cases with manned platforms right now. So you can hire a helicopter or a small aircraft, and that's what oil and gas is doing right now. They're flying King Airs out into the Arctic to take images and video of, the flow of ice, for example. So they're doing it. It costs more money, and it's just more expensive and maybe more time consuming.
When we talk about software, because DJI and 3D Robotics were at NAB almost side by side, and you're really arguing over software. I mean, yeah, some of the hardware is a little different, but really you're arguing over capabilities of what you can do with a drone automatically or not automatically, right?
Well, I think eventually that will be the argument. Right now, the argument is still over reliable hardware, because that nobody else has proven that they have reliable hardware. I think somebody will. Nobody has yet. There's some promising candidates, I think, but I wouldn't say you could point to another one right now. But fundamentally, it will be a software problem. And I think of you were talking about the novelty wearing off, and for me, since I'm a photographer and videographer, I think of these now as being cameras that are just somewhere else. And in part that's because the ergonomics have changed so much that they're now they feel more like cameras. We have buttons and dials for everything, so you don't have to be inconvenienced when you're flying, and you can still feel like you're in control. And so that's true. But we also rev very quickly. Every 6 months, there's something out that performs a lot better. So that excitement is actually still there. I think that excitement will probably go away when we get used to these things as just being tools. And I really do, we use the smartphone analogy all the time. Like, iPhones are cool, but really it's the apps that let you do things.
When you say reliability, are you talking about the engines? Are you talking about the controller? Are you talking about the ability to maintain it or fix it if you crashed it into something or you got it wet or something like that? What do you mean when you say maintainability?
It's I think it's early stages. It's being able to fly it without paying attention to the technical aspects. Spending most of your time paying attention to the technical aspects. So in order for mass adoption to happen, all of the technical details need to fade away, and the usability has to bubble up to the top. And that's where we've gotten, but it's very crude right now. You brought up half the words that you used, we don't even talk about. Maintenance, like these things. People fly these until they fall out of the sky, and that's one of the big problems. We need a much better way in the commercial world to be not only safe but to be insurable. And so we need schedules for maintenance on all the parts. All the parts need to know how long they last. We're starting to do these things with, for example, batteries that are smart and know their health and how they've been charged and discharge themselves in the right way after the right amount of time for storage. But it's still all very early, and I think there's a long way to go there.
I think you touch on a really important point, which is the vast complexity of every element of this. Just reliably flying a drone every day in real weather conditions and what have you is complicated, maintaining it. I mean, the RAND Corporation did a study of the Air Force and their drones and the manpower it takes, and they estimated that it takes 75 people to fly every single one of those combat air patrols. So for 65 missions a day, there are 75 people who are involved in launching it off the ground, taking it off, controlling it, passing it off, maintaining it when it lands, and then doing all the data processing. And what Eric is alluding to is that in order for this to be viable for the commercial space or civilian, is we have to take those 75 people and reduce those to 1. And that is unbelievably complicated. And we haven't really talked about the details. I mean, just weather itself and atmospheric and environmental conditions is one enormous thing. But he's absolutely right. We need to take all of that complexity out of the equation first. So we have to take the manpower from 75 to 1. Then we also have to take the cost down by a couple orders of magnitude for it to be practical. For that farmer you talk about who wants to answer a simple question about how much of my field was damaged, if you were going to assess that with, say, satellite imagery 10 years ago, you would be the NGA, you'd have a government satellite, it would send down several different images. You'd literally have a room full of people. A dozen people might work on getting that one answer. And that has to reduce down to like a mouse click. So yeah, I think very, very hard problems are to be solved in the next, say, 3 to 5 years as this all goes into the real world.
What's DroneDeploy investing in to make this a part of this easier for people?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong, and so many things that still require domain expertise, and those are the types of things that we're trying to address. On the reliability side, we're trying to help users not be able to make a mistake, and where possible, just hide information away from them where they're not expected to make a decision. If you think about your average user, if you're showing him information like how many satellites his drone can see, what type of GPS lock he's got, what flight mode he's in, like what does that information actually mean? What he's really after is that end data product. He wants back a video, he wants back a map, he wants back a 3D model. Once we've solved those problems sufficiently, we don't even need to show that information. We should only be showing the user something when they actually have to make a decision. And that simplicity comes with hiding away the problems that we've actually solved. And I think the tendency, at least initially in the drone space, was to show all the information and let the user decide what to do. And you just overwhelm somebody because they don't know what's important, what's not important, what decisions do they have to make. And we're really striving to make that.
One thing I learned very quickly with my DJI was you better have GPS lock on, 7 satellites, something like that?
Yeah.
If you don't, it's really hard to land. You have to be a pretty advanced pilot to land, particularly if there's some wind. because if you don't have GPS, that's a consumer problem. I can't imagine having to fly some of these bigger drones and get in trouble with them.
You could also look at the history of just the aircraft. If you looked at an airplane cockpit, from a World War II plane, I mean, a lot of the technology is the same. You had a variable pitch prop, and you had 3 levers for every engine, and you had 1 million gauges in front of you, steam gauges. I don't know, you might have had maybe 70 different things that you could monitor, and the pilot had to work on all that, and they literally had to throw like 4 people into the cockpit. If you remember, 727s I think needed 3 or 4, 2 pilots and a flight engineer and someone else. And over time, they have automated more and more of that. They've gotten, FADEC controls for engines to reduce, 3 liters to 1. They've used GPS to really simplify navigation, where you don't have to watch a couple gauges and watch 2 arrows converging to figure out where you are. But that took a long time. That took 50, 60 years for them to simplify things. And that's exactly what we're talking about doing. I mean, all those things were showing up on the screen because they needed to be there. You needed to have that information to fly it properly.
The other thing that I think Apple is using a drone over its new headquarters to study, the flow of construction material and people on the site, because it's a pretty big site. But I think they are using a Skycatch drone. I might be wrong on that, where there's a robot that replaces the battery and replaces the memory card in the drone, and then lets it go back up and fly again. Is that a problem for this industry? Is that something that the audience cares about? Having a drone that keeps flying all day long, all night long?
Well, it's a great example of monitoring change, right? I mean, that's something that we've used satellites for a long time. But what's problem with satellites is contrary to what the Hollywood movies tell you, it's like you don't always have your satellite over the place you need it when you want the picture. A drone is something you can put up and have it be totally persistent like that, where it's up 24 hours a day. And that's a really interesting kind of big data application. I mean, we haven't had the ability to hang a camera in the sky 24 hours a day to collect that kind of information. I mean, it's going to be really interesting what we can do with that information. I mean, already we work with a company up in Canada that's using what's called a WAMI, a wide area motion imagery sensor, to fly above a municipality where you are filming something on the order of a 16 to 32 square kilometer area, and you're going to monitor all of the traffic for that entire city for a 6-hour period. And there are all kinds of questions that they can answer from that. They can figure out, what the average traffic flow is. Is there speeding? Do they really need to put a crosswalk in a certain location because, in fact, there are children that they can track? And you can detect and track all those moving things in that image. And you can also answer questions like, here's the shopping center. Where are the customers coming from? Are they coming from the new highway overpass that we built? How are they getting there? Are they from the local neighborhood? I mean, I think once you can collect data like that, there are going to be a million questions that you can answer, but save real money. I mean, like where I live in Burlingame, they were going to put a crosswalk in. How did they figure out whether they're going to do it? Some poor person had to sit there with a clicker and click and actually count the number of people who crossed the street, before and after school. That's something you could collect from that aerial thing, along with answering a million other questions at the same time.
So people are using Phantoms actually already to do what you're talking about. Yeah, not for 24 hours at a time, obviously, but for 20 minutes at a time.
No, absolutely. And we work with the folks, who in the military would have to manually do that counting. I mean, they would have the aerial data, but they would literally, with a pen on the screen, count, and they would track vehicles doing this kind of a thing. Now with computer vision, we can do that stuff automatically for thousands of moving objects, and we can do that in real time, essentially. So you can.
The computer vision is a really new field. GoPro just bought a company yesterday that does stitching of images from 6 GoPros. That's the camera I'm using to record video now. I'm using a 360-degree camera. But those images need to be stitched together. There's a new camera coming out on Monday that has 3 lenses, and it's stitching in the camera those 3 lenses and figuring out how to do it in a way that humans don't see a seam or don't see an artifact or don't see a parallax problem between those three lenses, which gives you a really nice wide view. The DJI is going to be crazy about this kind of new camera technology, right? Certainly over the next year, I think this is going to be a big deal. I know GoPro's working on 2 new cameras for next year. This is going to be a new area, and a lot of this stuff is done again in software. We're waiting for guys like you to take the technology out of what you did with military satellites and bring it down to a DJI, right?
Well, that stuff you could do. I mean, the stuff you describe is really traditionally called image processing, which is, doing math to the pixels to generate an image product of some kind, like a mosaic or a stitched together image.
A friend of mine who's a photographer uses a DJI, takes multiple images and then puts them all together to make a huge image, which shows the entire globe in one image.
Yeah, absolutely. And then computer vision is really about using a computer to try to see the way a human does, to do the kinds of tasks like counting moving objects, for example, or understanding activity. So, from that traffic instance, for example, not only can you track a vehicle as it travels, several kilometers, but you can also detect events like cars making left turns. You might have an intersection where you think, we need to put a left turn signal in there because X number of vehicles are making that left turn, and that kind of behavior you can use computer vision to detect.
That's exactly the progression we're seeing. My co-founder was talking a bit earlier, saying that this is the kind of 3rd generation of drones. It was about the drones, then it was about the data. Now the data is not enough, and it's about the information. Given that you've got a map or you've got a video, what's more important now is how many people are in that map. How do you track a vehicle in that video? That's the real problem, and that's where the real value is.
Are you seeing any fusion between visual sensors and things like beacons? I just saw a company, and I forget the company name, I'm sorry, I put it up on my Facebook last night, but they put a Bluetooth beacon on everybody in a conference at the Box conference last week, and then mapped everybody moving around in the conference with some beacon receivers around the conference hall. And so they could tell who was the popular booth, they could tell how bad was the line at the bathrooms, that kind of stuff. Yeah. That was using Internet of Things technology, not visual technology, right. But it sounds like you can do the similar kind of stuff with visual technology as well. Are you going to see any kind of fusion between data that's coming off of Internet of Things sensors, sensors on railways at Union Pacific or something like that, along with the visual data that a DJI camera is going to capture?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, I think these are essentially just imaging platforms or payload platforms that are now kind of cloud connected all the time. That's like basically the premise of DroneDeploy. It's all cloud managed, and you can do. I mean, they were telling me a story that they got an alarm and they just saw a customer's drone was just flying off randomly, and they managed to intercept it and make it kind of go home and land. So, there's the whole layer that, I mean, it should have reported by itself. Oh, it did, right? There was an alarm.
Yeah, that was quite funny. There was somebody in Carolina who was out flying a drone, and trying to pack up his equipment, he accidentally flicked it into stabilize mode, which doesn't fly it entirely automatically. So it started to dip downwards, and we saw this, and he wasn't responding. We put it back into auto and kind of resumed its flight. But I mean, that's how we're thinking about drones, that the future, they're connected parts of the internet. They're always on, they're always streaming back data. If you think of the future use cases, it's not going to be the use cases where you fly a drone and then you wait 6 hours to use that data. It's going to be getting the data in real time. So that's the future we're building for now, and yeah, we think of them as always connected as much as possible.
But you're talking about data fusion. So there are lots of people look at the retail case exactly what you described, which is like tracking lines of people at a Starbucks or something. And so you can do that a number of ways. And there are startups that use your Wi-Fi on your phone looking for a hotspot to count the number of people, and that's one way to do it, and it's accurate. Bluetooth is another way. You could also do that visually using computer vision from fixed cameras. It really depends on what you have. I mean, again, to bring up the military, if anyone has seen like movies like Zero Dark 30, you understand there are lots of layers of information that people use. They use visual information. They might use SIGINT, like where are their radios? Does a person have a cell phone, for example? Where is it broadcasting from? Internet of Things is yet another. I mean, that's a ton more. And again, all of those things, though, they have to be synchronized temporally, geospatially, and it all has to be incredibly accurate. Because if your data is off, if this, if I think that, if I move that, or someone in this room moves, and I think they are, 5 meters that way and 10 to the left, but their Bluetooth thing says they're somewhere else, and I try to put that information together. If it's not synchronized properly, then it doesn't work. On the other hand, there's a power to combining information, like in biometrics, where if you go and use you have a fingerprint that could be inaccurate, it could be copied. But if you have a fingerprint and a smart card that you use for authentication, then that's even better. If you do that, fingerprint, smart card, and a retinal scan, then it's even more accurate. So I think, to your point, I think the fusion of information can make it, even more accurate as well.
In the area of power lines, and tell me if I'm just totally nuts. Right now
you may be, but maybe this point.
Right now, I assume they're using it to look at the power line and say, oh, there's a problem here that we need to go up and repair. Are we going to see drones with robots on them to actually go up and fix that line? I
don't know about that. That sounds cool.
Instead of having to climb up a tower and
I don't know.
turn off the power.
Does anyone know in the audience know the answer to that? Yeah. We could get to that, but does anyone know about fixing a power line with a robot? I think that was Robert's thing.
Yes, there's a group in San Diego that's developing a drone crawler. It's basically designed to have the wheels to crawl down the line and inspect the line.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a robot that crawls down the line and deals with that. That's sort of an interesting spot. Where is this industry going? Is just crazy. Because I'm seeing all sorts of innovation on camera technology, on LiDARs, on robots, on motors. The motors are still getting better.
Well, think about, I like to think of it historically. When you had the first airplane, 100 years ago, we had the Wright brothers, and we had aircraft, and we were very much in the same position where we are today, where we are just at the beginning, we have a lot of great ideas, we have some notion of where things are going, but we don't know everything yet. And if you look at from 1908 to 1980, imagine what happened with the aircraft industry. Who would have thought that we would have had international travel and all these incredible things, or all the imaging? But what was interesting about the history of aircraft was you had World War I came along, and they found uses for them to do exactly what we're using drones for: surveillance and reconnaissance, spotting artillery. And starting to do troop movements and what have you. And then they started weaponizing them and what have you. But when the First World War ended, the aviation industry was really in a rut. All these companies were going out of business. And I used to be a professor, so I'll do this nerdy thing, which is I'll ask the audience, do you know what ended up being the killer app for the airplane? Mail. Yes. Delivering the mail was the killer app for the airplane.
Which gets us to the slide behind
which us. Launched Boeing and all of the major aircraft manufacturers. They all were built by delivering the mail. Yeah, here we are.
Is Amazon's dream
I am
of
not
delivering
saying
stuff?
that's going to be the killer app for drones. No. But I think my answer is you don't know, because it's we haven't had 100 years of history of the aircraft, but it's going to be something like that.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem intuitive to me that we will deliver a lot of things on a quadcopter drone. The battery just doesn't last long enough. The efficiency is not good enough. I have an Apple Watch waiting for me at home right now that was delivered by UPS. I don't see a world where a drone is going to bring that to my front door and drop it off and leave it there for me, right?
Well, there's some practical, let's take search and rescue. It's not going to be a huge industry, but I think in Maine, they've just got an approval to fly drones with a certain amount of payload. I think it's like a 10-pound payload. But they're going to use them to look for lost hikers, which is a very expensive thing to do. And then it's going to have on it, it's going to have some kind of a payload that's going to deliver, emergency supplies. So, you may not get your Apple Watch delivered by drone, but you might get a blanket and a fire starter kit or something like that delivered to you by a drone. Like the company in, was it in the Netherlands? DHL is using a drone to deliver like medicine to an island or something. There will be other cases like that.
Anything on the delivery application of drones?
Are you guys working with delivery companies?
It's just payload, and the rest is it's whether we have enough infrastructure to allow things to fly without hitting each other and other things. after you do that, people can start businesses doing whatever they want.
At Coachella, I saw them flying a DJI Inspire 1 over the crowd and taking video and probably maybe doing photos to watch a crowd movement. I would use it for that, to understand which acts are more popular than others, and understand, oh, that guy was much more popular than we expected, so next year we're going to have 2 of that kind of performer, and split up the audience. And they sort of do that already with RFID and other ways to watch crowd movements and stuff like that. But where do you think this is going, and are we going to get over our fear of flying over people? Because they were flying over 100,000 people with a drone.
Yeah, well, I think the issue right now is hobbyists can do sort of what they want, and they might get in trouble if they endanger people, maybe, if they're taken to court. And on the commercially, I think flying over
one
people.
One got tased the other day for flying in a national park.
Yeah, he was tased in Hawaii for flying a 3-inch quadcopter.
That taser was a 3-inch quadcopter?
Yeah, it was a 3-inch quadcopter.
Wow.
That didn't seems a little excessive. But yeah, I think flying over people is of course a big issue when you talk about regulatory environment. Some countries have figured it out. They have a certain weight. It's all about maximum energy. And if you fly something over, say, 2 kilograms, you need a parachute. Or they come up with mechanisms for that.
Well, the FAA, if you're a private pilot, you know that you're not allowed to fly. I think it's less than is it 1,000 feet over a populated area? I think it's certainly more than 500 feet, right? 500 feet over a populated area, and I think is it vertically or horizontally? 1 mile separate. So there are rules for actual aircraft to do the same thing, and they're reasonable for that. Of course, the Blue Angels break that every time they come for Fleet Week, right?
Lots of paperwork.
Is that right? Yeah, I was going to say. But yeah, there are real consequences of an F-18 crashing into the Richmond district, yeah.
So I'm running out of stupid questions, so I'd like to get the crowd into the audience, or the audience into this, and I'll come and play Oprah. Yeah.
Hi guys, thanks for coming over. Appreciate your conversation and some of your comments. Wanted to ask you, technology push versus pull. So you've spent a lot of time talking about your kind of genesis, your background in the military. Obviously, I'm one of the grandfathers of small unmanned systems for special operations. So back in 2004, 2005, I was writing requirements, right, that have become what you're seeing here that consumers can purchase. So I think the question is are you seeing a shift where the commercial energy and effort is starting to actually affect what the military community sees as possible and is now defining requirements around?
That's a good question, and my answer is I don't think so. And it's only I think they're seeing.
Well, you're seeing camera technology. DARPA showed off one of their satellite or their drone cameras. They use a cell phone lenses and cell phone imaging sensors.
Yeah,
right?
but there's a big difference between research that the Defense Department is funding and stuff that's actually going into operational use. So there's a very long timeline between kind of the hope and promise of the DARPA projects to actually flying in a MQ-1, MQ-9 today, and that's separated by a lot. So I think probably the closest, and it's not drone related, it's like communication capability, radio technology. Certainly I think maybe the biggest is really the automation, the autopilots and that kind of technology to allow drones to fly more autonomously. That's probably the bigger one, but I don't see a lot because the military still has very specific requirements, and they have a pretty good idea of what they want. And I mean, just like you say, the special operations community is much more flexible in what they're doing, and especially on the tactical level, maybe you're seeing that more where it's not big Air Force that's being influenced by commercial stuff, but the special operations community where you have just a couple guys who are part of a squad that are going out. Yes, you might see, and they have less restrictions on them too.
There's a part two. It's more of a comment and then a reflection. Yeah. If you think back to the Affordable Care Act, right? All the trouble they were having trying to get the damn thing to work right, and then a couple of engineers up in the Bay Area spent a weekend and solved the problem.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going with my question.
Oh, well, you're touching on a different thing, which is a completely separate topic, which is the military is used to paying large defense contractors by the hour to write something from scratch. And out here in Silicon Valley, we have a good idea. We go into our garage and we nerd it out for a year, and we come up with something that solves a problem ahead of what they might anticipate. And that is a totally different thing.
Yeah,
and I think that's something that...
I know a guy who built his own antennas so that he could get HD video before DJI shipped it on their drones. He had it 2 years ago, right?
Yeah. That's a different thing, which is innovation and the DoD.
Well, the point is a lot of the drones, right, before DJI showed up, and kudos to you guys, and DroneDeploy and some of the other players out there that are starting to show up, what it was basically the military would define these requirements, and then some entrepreneurial smart guys would say, we'll take a crack at that. And it's almost like throwing the dice at the craps table in Vegas. Maybe we're going to get the requirements right. Maybe we're going to get some funding to build it. And so the point is there's such a strong bias from the military-industrial complex as far as unmanned systems, the aviation, the regulation, et cetera, et cetera. How do you see that playing out over time? Do you see that rigid, structured approach to innovation, product development? Do you see that loosening and changing over time?
Well, it's going to have to...
I'll jump in here.
Yeah,
I mean, I visited Make Magazine a couple weeks ago, and they had a whole article on drones that are $200, and people now are flying drones against each other. They're playing competitive games with drones, right? The military ain't going to do that, right? So in Silicon Valley on weekends, we get together and go, hey, let's crash our drones into each other because they're only $200 and we can rebuild them and have fun doing that.
Yeah,
the military's not going to do that.
I think, like, for example, let's just talk about image processing and computer vision. I think companies like Facebook and Google are investing just incredible amounts of money in things like deep learning, for example, which are going to be very, very powerful tools for things like image recognition, and they already are working today. And I think, and there are tons of other, great Silicon Valley companies doing the same thing in image processing. And I don't think the defense contractors can keep up in any means because they don't have the business model, they don't have the motivation.
I saw two guys at Y Combinator who built a checkout counter with 4 Logitech cameras. And you put a bag of chips underneath it, and it says, "Oh, there's a bag of chips,"
right?
And charges you for a bag of Doritos,
right? Just
without seeing a barcode, just seeing the bag,
That's right. But I think they're going to have to. So I think it's really you've seen that there's something called Better Buying Power 3. There's an initiative within the DoD to try to change their acquisition. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, if you ever worked in the military, if you follow the actual flow chart of the DoD's acquisition from the time that they actually think they want to buy something to the time that they want to buy it, if you go through, it's a poster. I have it in my office. It's like 6 feet wide. It's 6 years. And that's just the kind of how they've done it. And it works well when you're building, like, I don't know, an airplane, like the F-35. I mean, it hasn't worked well for that, but let's not bring that up. But, if you're building a tank or other thing, I mean, these requirements, they're that way for a reason. But I think for innovation, it has to change. They have to think about integrating, plugging in innovative Lego blocks into these larger systems that can be replaceable. Because there is so much innovation going on around.
2 years ago, I read a book called Age of Context. When I was writing the book, putting a CubeSat up into space cost $1.1 million.
Yep.
Today, SRI says it's less than $100,000, 2.5 years later, 3 years later, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to see innovation happen because you're able to put a sensor up at, in space and then use a drone over your farm or over close to things?
And everything in between. I mean, you're already seeing, you've got small drones that fly low. You've got, companies like Facebook and Google both invested in companies that make drones that fly at a higher altitude that are solar powered, that can be persistent. They're more for internet delivery, but you could use something like that for imaging as well. So absolutely, from space all the way to the ground, you're going to be able to put cameras. And that is definitely coming. You've got, there are 3 or 4 companies that are based around the Bay Area that are putting up small satellites, for example, and they're all collecting good information.
At Google X, they have an initiative, a 1 pixel per inch imaging initiative. They want to image the entire world with 1 pixel per inch. How close are we to that? Is that
Well,
10 years?
they're
Is that
pretty
50
close to
years?
doing that. I mean, first of all, they can. I mean, Google. So I know a little bit about Google Earth because I've funded Keyhole when it was spun out of Intrinsic Graphics, 15 years ago, and they bought high-resolution information, aerial imagery from companies that flew aircraft over cities, and they stitched that together to make that image. And I think that was like 1 foot per pixel or something. So I think you can certainly get to what they're talking about. I mean, I guess you'd crowdsource it, but you could imagine doing that if enough people had Phantoms out there, and they posted this stuff to YouTube, and we're building a capability of being able to take video and just mosaic it automatically and geo-rectify it. So if you did that, you could essentially take everybody's drone footage of, like you were saying, you fly up and down your street. Well, if you put everyone's flying up and down their street images together, you could get there.
How many drones does DJI need to sell to get to that world?
Well, they sold a lot of them.
Anyways, any other questions? Yeah.
Ooh, can you fly it, Eric?
A demo of the Phantom 3. I'm told I can fly it here as long as I don't fly over people. Is that still valid?
Yeah. Yes. Is there any way to get the video up on the screen?
What's that?
You only have the 1080p model here, right?
Yeah. We won't be able to put it on the screen.
Only.
Only, yeah.
That's
only
a big effort to get a 1080p sensor on a drone. I mean, you got to give those guys some respect.
Well,
The other one's 4K.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's a lot of information to capture.
See the picture here. You see the picture here. It's a 720p video signal coming over Lightbridge, which is our proprietary high-definition wireless broadcast, and we rate it at 1.2 miles, which is way out of sight. Wow. But it goes much further than that in good environments.
By the way, you flew one of these into a volcano.
I did.
Did you get a beep?
And you hit some interference. Tell me about some of the interference.
Yeah, we had some interference at the volcano in November when I went for the first time. That was really on a whim by myself. When was it? I don't even remember. Last April. And then we went back in January with Good Morning America to broadcast it live, which was much more complicated because we had to actually call satellites over.
Yeah.
And it was no problem. The gear had gotten so much better. Actually, it was September to January. We had another rev of the gear, and we didn't have any issues with interference. The range was fine. We were working 1,200 meters out, and they worked really well. Most of them melted to some degree, but they all flew, and they came home. So the other thing about the Phantom 3 is it has optical flow and ultrasonic sensors on the bottom. There's a little sensor module. We call it Vision Positioning System, VPS. And so that will allow us, even in here, in a GPS-denied environment, to do position hold and altitude hold. So I'll just hover it and fly it a little bit and then land it.
There you go.
It's got the optical flow sensors looking at the ground, so it'll try to come back to me because it wants to stay in the same place. It's pretty much, because the optical flow sensor is there, it's hands-off even in an environment like this inside, where you have lots of ground effects. You can hover this thing hands-off 1 foot off the ground, which is really uncanny for anyone who flies anything, to imagine 1 foot off the ground hovering. All right, I'll bring it down.
You know what I really liked about that? It was mishap-free. Thanks, Eric.
Well, I saw that thing fly over 100,000 people. So actually, the DJI.
This is it's $9.99. This thing, by the way.
Any other questions before we let you go and have some beer? Yeah. One more.
End game is
What's the end game?
the final vision. Is this everybody has a copter in their pocket, or your cell phone flies, or what's the final vision for personal side?
Oh, man.
On the personal side.
How many decades do we have to go forward?
Well, I mean, I'll give you one perspective, and again, it's not a drone one. I think they'll just blend. I mean, 6 to 8 years ago, none of us had, I don't think, cameras on our cell phones, right? And now we all do, and that just is what it is. I mean, we do lots of things with them. We don't carry digital cameras anymore. There's all kinds of effects of that, but they have just kind of blended into our everyday life. I think we will see drones doing things that we've seen people on ladders doing in the past, or all kinds of other things, and I think they'll just blend into the culture in a way. That would be my just comment as a citizen. But
Yeah, I agree with that. We'll find the use cases that they're best suited to, and then we'll just see them taking over those. And maybe there's some things that retain, or they carry on being done the way they are, but maybe the drones start delivering the mail. And in 20 years' time, that's just the way it is, and it goes like that.
Yeah, it seems hard.
What's that?
Yeah, cleaning the gutters. Yeah, like a leaf blower.
That would be great.
I mean, it's hard to imagine that it will not be like that, because even if the regulatory environment is not favorable in one country, the rest of the world will be moving, or some percentage of the world will be moving forward. So anyone who doesn't do it will start to fall behind. I mean, there are so many gains that we can that we get from this technology, in gains in efficiency and multiple axes at the same time. So you end up with 1,000-fold, 10,000-fold improvements in efficiency, and we can think of many examples in which that happens.
We can do a couple more. How much time do we have? Yeah, let's do a couple more. Okay.
Eric, can you tell us more about the autonomous state of flying these drones? And then secondly, it seems like endurance is always a major issue for most applications. Do you have any plans for either other platforms, or looks like battery technology? It doesn't look like we're going to get 50% improvement from battery technology. What are your plans around the endurance
nuclear
side?
powered?
Yeah, nuclear. Yeah, nuclear.
Nuclear power? Great.
Yeah, well, I mean, what we do is really autonomy at an accessible price point, because I think autonomy has been around in the high end forever. But for us, being able to put a tremendous amount of autonomy into something that costs $1,000 is now pretty easy. And I think for us, what will be interesting is to enable autonomous features to developers outside of what we can do, because we've written a really good app that has telemetry and a video preview. It's basically a camera app for a drone. But there are many applications that aren't, where you don't care about those things, and really what you want to do is, draw a polygon and have it automatically generate a 3D map. So that autonomy is all really easy if you can just tell the drone what to do, and for example, you have access to a mobile programming SDK or an onboard SDK or cloud connectivity. We're already there in all those parts, and we, to some extent, are waiting for developers to code against it. So I think autonomy is here. I think one reason you don't see it used a lot is the regulatory environment is complex for the commercial world, and also the drones are barbaric right now. In the consumer world, they just don't know they don't have enough sensors to be able to make sense of the world around them. So you can absolutely make these things autonomous, but they'll be autonomous into a tree or into a building. All these follow me products that show skiing and mountain climbing, and that is insane in the short term. In the long term, it's great, because we'll have sensitive void. They'll just refuse to hit things, and when we get there, then autonomy really makes sense. But for now, I think baby steps in development are where autonomy is. And endurance, again, this is all we're in the early stages in almost every way in the consumer drone market. So, we increased the power tremendously from the last generation to this generation of the Phantom, but also increased the endurance. So now we're talking, say, 23 minutes of real-world battery life from a battery that is smart and costs, just over $100. So, battery life does not change as quickly, and there are certainly options like fuel cells or something that, are maybe impractical for consumers, but could last a lot longer. So if you needed something that flew an hour or a little bit more, you could do it, but it's always at the trade-off of cost and convenience. So I think there's always a sweet spot. What we're seeing in the consumer drone industry and light commercial drone industry is about 20 minutes as the sweet spot. If you scale size up, the battery life tends to go down until it starts to go up again. So there's this kind of sweet spot, which is kind of this size, phantom size, maybe a little bit bigger. If you get smaller or a little bit bigger, you tend to suffer, and that's why you see kind of heavy lift things that fly 45 minutes an hour, and then everything else is kind of this size.
Anybody else? Well, thank you for joining us. This was a lot of fun. Any last comments from you guys? Where this world
Can we take a spherical picture with you up here?
Yeah, that sort of gives
Robert's
you,
really into his GoPro setup. I have this little Ricoh. There's one button.
I mean, this gives you a sense of where I think your company is investing in, understanding this new 360-degree view. I know GoPro's working on this. I think GoPro's working on a drone. That's the
They might be.
That's the rumor. So we'll see if you have a competitor by the end of the year.
Okay, everybody look at this yellow thing. You don't remember a thing. All right, there you go. Thanks. I'll post that.
It erased my mind. What the hell was that thing? So thank you so much.
Useful. No, hey, thank you, and I want to thank everyone for coming out. That was definitely an interesting conversation. Our goal at SUS News is to disseminate relevant information to the community, and I think today we heard. I don't even get to hear all this stuff. That's the sad part for me. I really, at the end of the day, I'm like, dang, I didn't get to hear this. I really hope the takeaway today is that people really learned something or got some insights or thought about something or networked with somebody. That's really the goal. I'd like to thank you guys for coming out and helping out with that. I think that was an interesting exchange. Also, one other note, I did get an email today from the FAA on a FOIA request I did back in November of 2008 asking about who had COAs. I thought it was pretty funny that it happened today. But anyway, thanks. Again, registration will be at 8:30 tomorrow. We have another full day with the SAR workshop, the RCAP workshop, and the mapping workshop. And we did add some more chairs to the room, so if anyone wants to hear from guys that are experts, each one of these guys has 10 years experience in their field. Come on out and check that out. Everybody else, good night. We'll see you tomorrow.